one would think that in the logic of counterbalancing China, you want as many members as possible in this thing called the Quad. But there's some real limiting factors, and not just the fact that it's called the Quad and nobody wants to change the name to the Quint or the Sept. One limiting factor is India, which is a critical partner, which, because of its non-aligned history, does not want to expand the numbers, and frankly doesn't want to dilute its own influence in shaping the agenda of the Quad. So that's a limiting factor. Another limiting factor is that countries like Korea, while they have a very strong bilateral security relationship with the US, are going to be more careful than the US, Japan, Australia, or India vis-a-vis China. That might be true for New Zealand or some other potential partners who do not have quite the wherewithal, the political consensus to stand up to the Chinese pressure the way Canberra, Delhi, Tokyo, and Washington can. And for those reasons, I think for the near term, the Quad will remain the Quad. But the Malabar naval exercises, cooperation on pandemic relief and vaccine production, intelligence sharing and coordination diplomatically, I think that will be a pickup game. I think you'll find, to mix metaphors, that there's the 4 Quad members at the core, but you will find an a la carte menu where New Zealand might participate in some aspects, Canada in some aspects. I think Korea will be in that mix. The UK and France will be in that mix. I think Holland will be in that mix. And maybe a few other European countries, and perhaps Vietnam, which interestingly in surveys we've done at CSIS, is a country in Southeast Asia that thinks the Quad is really important because the Vietnamese are historic rivals of China and want that balance of power. But everybody will be a bit careful. And one more reason, of course, is that in the game of strategic influence, the big powers, including China, are all looking at Southeast Asia as the playing field for influence. And in Southeast Asia, despite the problems in Myanmar, the coup legacy in Thailand, the Duterte government in the Philippines, a lot of problems. Despite all that, in Southeast Asia, there's still a belief that ASEAN, the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, has got to be the principal architecture for their engagement with the big powers. They don't want to join the Quad. They don't want the Quad to eclipse ASEAN. As I said, Vietnam, they're more cynical. They're happy to have the Quad complicate Chinese planning. But the other non-ASEAN states are much more careful. And so the US and Australia, Japan, India, and China, for that matter, we're all paying attention to what Southeast Asia wants, because that's where the game of influence is. So you can sort of feel how this will limit to some extent membership and participation. But I think the Quad is a growth industry. I think you're going to see countries like Canada and New Zealand and the UK and Korea perhaps doing more and more with the Quad because they share some of the concerns about Chinese coercion, and they share a commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, even if they don't always use those terms in their own government documents.